Greetings, warriors and dreamers. Welcome to the realms of sleep, where tonight we journey through the epic world of God of War. I am your guide through the 9 realms, where ancient gods whisper their secrets and mythic landscapes unfold before us. From the frost-covered mountains of Midgard to the golden halls of Asgard, these tales of gods and giants will carry you into peaceful slumber. Lay down your weapons, rest your weary head, and allow the legends of these powerful beings to become the landscape of your dreams. The battles have been fought, and now is the time for rest. So close your eyes, brave one. Let the fire of the hearth warm you as we begin our journey through realms both wondrous and dangerous. The first breath of winter had settled across the inlet like a blessing of silence, transforming what once roared with the Leviathan's fury into a mirror of crystalline perfection. Kratos moved through this hushed landscape with measured steps, his boots creating the only sound, soft crunches that seemed almost irreverent against the profound quiet that had claimed this place. The moon hung full and bright above, casting silver light across the frozen surface, each reflected star creating pinpoints of brilliance that stretched toward horizons lost in shadow. He had come here without conscious decision, following paths worn into memory rather than deliberate navigation. The inlet called to him in ways he couldn't articulate, not through mystical compulsion, but through something deeper, more fundamental. Perhaps it was the promise of solitude, or the way this place embodied transformation from chaos to stillness, where once the great serpent's movements had churned water into thunderous waves, now only crystalline silence remained, beautiful and complete. Kratos chose his position with warrior's instinct, close enough to the shore to appreciate the ice's ethereal beauty, yet elevated sufficiently to observe approaches from multiple directions. Old habits died hard, even in moments intended for peace. He settled onto a fallen log, worn smooth by countless seasons, its surface dusted with frost that sparkled like scattered diamonds in the moonlight. From his pack, he withdrew his whetstone and Leviathan axe, the familiar weight of both tools offering comfort through their certainty. The first draw of stone across metal rang clear in the crystalline air, a pure note that seemed to travel far across the frozen inlet before returning as whispered echo. The sound pleased him, clean, purposeful, devoid of the desperate urgency that usually accompanied weapon maintenance in hostile territory. Tonight, this was ceremony rather than necessity, meditation through familiar motion rather than preparation for imminent violence. As he worked, establishing the rhythm that had accompanied him through countless such sessions across realms and years, Kratos allowed his attention to expand beyond the immediate task. The inlet spread before him like a vast jewel, its surface so perfectly still that distinguishing between reflected stars and their originals required deliberate focus. The ice appeared thick enough to support considerable weight, formed during weeks of steady cold that had arrived early this year, transforming liquid chaos into solid serenity. Each stroke of the whetstone brought subtle changes to the axe's edge, microscopic improvements that collectively would make the difference between clean strike and ragged wound when battle inevitably returned. But tonight, that practical purpose felt secondary to the meditative quality of repeated motion, the satisfaction of gradual refinement, the way familiar routine could anchor mind and spirit when contemplation threatened to drift toward less comfortable territories. The silence here was different from other quiet places he had known. Not the oppressive hush of tomb or temple, weighted with ancient menace and watching eyes. Not the tense stillness before battle, when even wind seemed to hold its breath in anticipation of violence. This was peace made manifest, the profound quiet that arose when chaos had been transformed into harmony, when struggle had resolved into rest. It reminded him, in ways both welcome and painful, of evenings spent beside Faye, when her presence had made such moments possible. She had understood the warrior's need for these interludes, times when weapons required attention, not because battle loomed, but because maintenance of tools represented maintenance of self. Sharpen your axe as you sharpen your spirit, she had once observed, watching him work beside their cabin's fire. Both grow dull without regular care, and both serve you poorly when neglected. Her words had carried wisdom he had been too proud to acknowledge fully at the time, though her meaning had proven itself through experience. A subtle vibration traveled through the log beneath him, so faint he might have imagined it had his senses not been honed by centuries of vigilance. The sensation, repeated after several seconds, rhythmic and deep, like distant thunder or the pulse of some vast heart beating far below the ice. Kratos paused in his sharpening, listening with focused intensity, trying to identify the source of this mysterious resonance. The vibrations came again, more distinct now that he concentrated specifically on perceiving them, not mechanical sounds like shifting ice or settling wood, but something organic, purposeful. The rhythm was too regular for geological phenomena, too deep for any surface creature he might expect in these waters. Whatever created these pulses dwelt far beneath the frozen surface, in depths where sunlight never penetrated and pressure could crush the unwary. Rather than concern, Kratos felt curious recognition. The rhythm reminded him of something fundamental. Heartbeat or breathing. The essential cadences that marked life's continuance. Perhaps some creature dwelt in the depths beneath this inlet, something vast and patient that had survived the Leviathan's departure, now maintaining solitary vigil in the dark waters below. The thought brought strange comfort rather than alarm. He was not the only being who sought solitude in this transformed place. The whetstone resumed its passage across metal, each stroke measured to match the mysterious rhythm from below. Without conscious decision, he found himself synchronizing his movements with those distant pulses, creating harmony between his immediate task and whatever presence stirred in the depths. The conjunction felt natural, appropriate, two solitary beings acknowledging each other across the barrier of ice and intention, neither intruding upon the other's chosen isolation. As he worked, memories surfaced, with the gentle persistence of water finding its own level. Vay's voice seemed to whisper through the barely perceptible wind that stirred surface frost into brief, spiraling dances. Not actual communication. He retained too much sense for such wishful thinking, but recollection so vivid it took on qualities of presence. Her words about finding peace within strength, about the warrior's need for contemplation as well as action, about the way solitude could heal wounds that companionship sometimes inadvertently kept fresh. You carry burdens that were never meant for one person alone, she had told him during one of their rare conversations about his past. But carrying them is not the same as being crushed by them. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is set them down for a while. Let yourself breathe without their weight upon your shoulders. He had dismissed such counsel then as impractical sentiment, but time had revealed its accuracy. Moments like this, when weapons could be tended without urgency, when silence offered restoration rather than threat, these proved essential for maintaining balance. The rhythmic pulses from beneath the ice continued, steady and reassuring in their consistency. Whatever dwelt in those depths had settled into patient existence, neither demanding attention nor rejecting awareness when it was offered. A model of solitary contentment, perhaps. worthy of consideration from someone whose life had been shaped by conflict and loss. There was wisdom in such acceptance, in finding peace within chosen circumstances, rather than constantly striving to alter them. Kratos tested the axe's edge against his thumb, carefully, with pressure calibrated through long experience to reveal sharpness without drawing blood. The metal sang with perfection, honed to the precise balance between cutting efficiency and durability that his particular fighting style required. Yet he continued the rhythmic sharpening, recognizing that tonight the process served purposes beyond weapon maintenance. Each stroke carried away more than microscopic metal imperfections. It also ground down tension, frustration, the accumulated roughness that battle and responsibility inevitably created in Warrior's spirit. The stars reflected in the ice seemed to pulse in harmony with the mysterious rhythm from below, though he recognized this as perceptual effect rather than cosmic synchronization. Still, the illusion pleased him, the sense that this moment existed in harmony with forces larger than individual will or immediate circumstance. For once, he was neither fighting against fate nor struggling to shape it, merely existing within the present moment, with acceptance rare in his turbulent existence. The cold air carried sense of winter purity, snow and frost, the clean smell of water transformed by temperature into crystalline perfection, the subtle fragrance of pine trees distant enough to add depth without domination. These aromas spoke of seasons turning, as they always had, of natural cycles continuing regardless of divine politics or mortal struggles. There was comfort in such constancy, in recognition that some things remained beyond the reach of gods and monsters alike. A memory surfaced of standing beside another body of water in circumstances far different from tonight's serenity. The rage that had driven him then, the desperate need for answers and vengeance that had made peace impossible, reflection unthinkable. How far he had traveled from that burning anger, not in distance, but in understanding. The fury remained when circumstances required it, but no longer ruled his every moment. Faye had begun that transformation, Atreus had continued it, and time itself had refined it into something approaching wisdom. The whetstone's passage across metal continued its hypnotic rhythm, matched by the gentle pulsing from whatever presence maintained its vigil beneath the ice. Two solitary beings acknowledging existence across barriers of element and intention, sharing this moment without need for communication or contact. The conjunction felt complete in itself, requiring nothing beyond mutual recognition of chosen solitude and the peace it could provide when embraced rather than endured. He thought of Atreus, hopefully sleeping soundly in their distant cabin, surrounded by protections both magical and mundane that would guard his rest. The boy had grown so much from the tentative child who had begun their mountain journey, developing into someone capable of carrying forward lessons learned and wisdom gained. That progress meant Kratos could allow himself these moments of solitary reflection without constant worry, could trust that preparations made and knowledge shared would serve when needed. The axe required no further sharpening, had required none for some time, yet the motion continued, meditative and soothing in ways that pure rest sometimes failed to achieve. There was value in purposeful activity that demanded just enough attention to prevent mental drift, while allowing consciousness to settle into deeper patterns. Warriors knew this instinctively. Sometimes the mind required occupation to achieve the peace that direct pursuit of tranquility could not provide. Another pulse traveled through the log and ground beneath him, the mysterious rhythm maintaining its steady cadence from whatever depths it originated. The sound had become companionable rather than curious, a reminder that even in chosen solitude, awareness of other existence could provide comfort without intrusion. He was alone, but not isolated, separate, but somehow connected to the larger patterns of life that continued around and beneath him. The reflected stars shifted slightly as barely perceptible current moved water beneath the ice, creating momentary distortions in the celestial mirror before returning to crystalline clarity. Even in apparent stillness, life continued, subtle movements and changes that spoke of persistence rather than stagnation. The inlet had not died when the Leviathan departed. It had transformed, finding new expressions of vitality adapted to altered circumstances. Time moved differently in such moments, measured not by external markers but by internal rhythms. Breathing, heartbeat, the steady passage of whetstone across metal. Minutes might have passed, or hours. The distinction seemed irrelevant when purpose aligned with peace in rare harmony. This was luxury seldom available to warriors. Time without urgency, solitude without vigilance, strength without the need to prove or defend it. Faye's presence seemed strongest in such moments, not as memory or wishful imagination, but as integrated part of his ongoing existence. Her influence had become woven into his responses, her wisdom incorporated into his decision-making, her love transformed into capacity for nurturing others that had surprised him with its naturalness. She had not departed when her physical form failed. She had become part of who he was, traveling with him in ways that death could not touch. The mysterious pulse from beneath the ice seemed to acknowledge this recognition, its rhythm taking on qualities almost of approval or encouragement. Perhaps that vast presence in the depths understood something about persistence and transformation, about finding new ways to exist when old forms were no longer possible. There was comfort in such kinship, even across barriers of species and element. His breathing had synchronized with both the whetstone's rhythm and the pulses from below, creating triple harmony that felt as natural as walking or speaking. Body, activity, and environment aligned in perfect cooperation, each element supporting the others without strain or artificial effort. Such moments were gifts, rare conjunctions when everything fell into proper relationship without conscious manipulation or forced coordination. The wind that stirred frost crystals into brief, spiraling dances carried what might have been whispers. Sounds so faint they hovered at the threshold between perception and imagination. Not voices speaking words, but something more fundamental. The sound of contentment, of peace achieved rather than peace imposed. If Faye's presence lingered anywhere, it would be in such gentle communications, in the way natural phenomena could seem to carry meaning for those prepared to receive it. Kratos allowed the whetstone to rest against his palm, its work complete, but its comfort continuing through familiar weight and texture. The axe gleamed in moonlight, edge perfect for whatever purposes might eventually require its use. But tonight those purposes seemed distant and theoretical, less important than this moment of harmony achieved between warrior and solitude, between strength and rest. The pulsing from beneath the ice continued its steady rhythm, that mysterious presence maintaining its patient vigil in dark waters where pressure and cold created environment utterly foreign to surface dwellers. Yet life persisted there, as it persisted everywhere, adapting to circumstances that might seem impossible, finding ways to thrive in conditions that would destroy the unprepared. There was lesson in such persistence, model worth contemplating for anyone whose existence had been shaped by constant adaptation to hostile circumstances. Stars wheeled slowly overhead, their reflected twins shifting subtly as imperceptible currents moved through water beneath the ice. Time continued its passage, but gently, without the urgency that usually marked its flow. Tonight belonged to contemplation and rest, to the rare luxury of strength that need not prove itself, of vigilance that could relax without abandoning responsibility. These were gifts not to be squandered through impatience or artificial acceleration. The cold had settled into his bones without discomfort, clean cold that clarified rather than numbed, that spoke of purity rather than hostility. His body had adapted to such conditions through necessity, but tonight the adaptation felt like harmony rather than mere survival. He belonged in this crystalline silence as surely as he belonged anywhere, part of the larger pattern that included the mysterious presence below and the wheeling stars above. Memory brought him another of Faye's observations. Strength without wisdom becomes destruction. Wisdom without strength becomes helplessness. But when they're balanced, when they support each other, she had not finished the sentence, leaving him to discover through experience what such balance might achieve. Tonight, in this moment of perfect equilibrium between power and peace, he understood what she had meant. The whetstone resumed its gentle passage across metal, not because further sharpening was needed, but because the motion itself had become meditation, connection to purposes beyond immediate utility. Each stroke carried intention without urgency, care without anxiety, the satisfaction of work well done combined with acceptance of work that was never truly finished. Like the warrior's path itself, weapon maintenance was process rather than achievement, journey rather than destination. Beneath the ice, that patient presence continued its steady pulse, heartbeat of something vast and mysterious that had found peace in solitary depths. Their vigils paralleled each other, surface and depth, air and water, temporary and possibly eternal, yet connected through shared understanding of what solitude could offer when embraced rather than endured. Neither was truly alone while such recognition persisted. The night deepened around him, darkness becoming richer rather than more oppressive, silence growing more profound without becoming empty. This was fullness disguised as void, presence that spoke through absence, strength that revealed itself through willingness to simply be rather than constant need to act. For a warrior whose life had been defined by motion and conflict, such stillness felt revolutionary. His breath emerged in silver clouds that dissipated quickly in the dry air, each exhalation carrying away tension and worry, each inhalation drawing in clarity and calm. The rhythm had become natural, unconscious, body and spirit working in harmony to maintain balance that required no conscious effort. This was how peace felt when genuine. Not forced tranquility, but authentic rest. The whetstone sang its small song against metal, each note pure and clear in the crystalline air. The sound traveled far across the frozen surface before returning as whispered echo, creating brief conversation between action and response, intention and consequence. There was beauty in such simplicity, in the way purposeful work could become art without pretension or artificial elevation. Time flowed like honey through winter air, slowly, sweetly, without the bitter urgency that usually marked its passage. Minutes became eternal while hours passed unnoticed. Linear progression transformed into cyclical rhythm that matched breathing, heartbeat, the steady pulse from depths below. This was time as it should be experienced, fully, consciously, without the desperate grasping that usually characterized mortal relationship with temporal flow. The stars reflected in the ice seemed to breathe with the mysterious presence below, creating illusion of cosmic participation in this small moment of harmony. Reality or perception mattered less than the comfort such apparent connection provided, the sense that individual experience participated in patterns larger than personal circumstance. Even solitude could be shared when properly understood. Faye's voice seemed to whisper through the gentle wind, "You are never as alone as you believe, never as separate as fear suggests. Every moment of genuine peace you allow yourself becomes peace available to others. Every instance of authentic strength you claim becomes strength others can draw upon. You are connected to everything, even when you cannot see the threads." The truth of these remembered words settled into his awareness like snow accumulating on still water. Gently, naturally, without disturbance to what lay beneath, connection persisted even in solitude, perhaps especially in solitude, when the noise of interaction could not obscure subtler communications. He was part of something larger whether he acknowledged it or not. Tonight he chose acknowledgement over isolation. The pulse from beneath the ice seemed to strengthen momentarily, that mysterious presence asserting itself just enough to confirm continued existence before settling back into patient rhythm. Whatever dwelt in those depths had achieved balance between presence and withdrawal, between assertion and acceptance. There was wisdom in such moderation, in knowing when to emerge and when to remain hidden. His own existence had swung between extremes of visibility and concealment. The god of war whose rage was legend, the hermit who sought only to be forgotten. Perhaps true wisdom lay in finding middle ground, in being present without domination, strong without oppression, protective without possessiveness. The balance Faye had helped him begin to understand, that Atreus continued to teach him through simply being the person he was becoming. The whetstone's work was complete, but the motion continued because completion was not the point. The point was presence, awareness, the willing participation in moments that offered rest to spirits usually driven by necessity and purpose. Warriors rarely enjoyed such luxury. When it appeared, wisdom suggested embracing it fully rather than rushing toward the next challenge. Around him, the frozen inlet maintained its crystalline perfection. Stars above and below creating double infinity that spoke of possibilities beyond immediate comprehension. Beauty existed here without purpose beyond its own being. Perfect because it needed nothing from observers beyond appreciation. Such appreciation was gift freely given and freely received, requiring nothing beyond willingness to see what was actually present. The mysterious rhythm from below had become so familiar it felt like part of his own internal processes. Heartbeat or breathing made audible through environmental amplification. Synchronization was complete now, his existence harmonized with that patient presence in ways that required no understanding beyond recognition. Two solitary beings sharing the same moment across barriers that connected rather than separated. This was peace as it should be, not emptiness but fullness. Not withdrawal but engagement, not defeat but victory achieved through acceptance rather than conquest. The warrior's greatest triumph might be knowing when not to fight, when to let strength serve rest rather than conflict. Tonight, surrounded by crystal silence and accompanied by mysterious depths, he had found such triumph. The night continued its patient passage overhead, stars wheeling slowly through courses established before gods or mortals had names. Time moved because it must, but gently, without the harsh urgency that usually drove its flow. There was beauty in such constancy, in the way celestial rhythms continued regardless of terrestrial struggles. offering perspective that transcended immediate circumstance. His breathing had become so synchronized with the pulse from below that distinguishing between them required conscious effort. Two rhythms had become one, surface dweller and depth inhabitant unified through shared participation in this moment of perfect stillness. Such unity needed no explanation beyond its own existence, no justification beyond the peace it provided. The whetstone rested now against his palm, its work finished but its presence continuing to offer comfort through familiar weight and texture. The axe gleamed in starlight, edge perfect for whatever future might require, but those requirements seemed distant and theoretical compared to the immediate reality of crystalline silence and mysterious companionship from the depths. As the night reached its deepest hour, when darkness achieved its fullest expression before beginning subtle turn toward dawn, Kratos allowed himself complete surrender to this rare moment. The warrior's vigilance relaxed without disappearing. Strength remained without tension. Awareness continued without anxiety. This was rest as gods had perhaps intended before power corrupted purpose, before strength became domination rather than protection. The pulse beneath the ice maintained its steady rhythm, that patient presence keeping faithful vigil in dark waters where pressure created environment as foreign to surface dwellers as any alien realm. Yet life persisted there, had found ways to thrive in conditions that would destroy the unprepared. There was lesson in such adaptation, model worth remembering when circumstances demanded flexibility rather than rigid resistance. In the distance, barely audible above the profound silence, wind moved through pine boughs with sound like distant whispers or gentle breathing. The forest maintained its own rhythms, its own patterns of rest and activity, part of the larger web of existence that included solitary warriors and mysterious depth dwellers alike, all connected, all participating in cycles larger than individual understanding. The cold had become companion rather than adversary, clear and clean without bite of malice. His body had adapted completely now, finding harmony with environment rather than merely enduring it. Such adaptation felt natural tonight, appropriate to circumstances that invited cooperation rather than conflict. Even elements could be allies when approached with proper intention. Time continued its honey-slow passage, each moment complete in itself, yet flowing naturally into the next. Linear progression had transformed into cyclical rhythm that matched breathing, heartbeat, the steady pulse from mysterious depths. This was temporal experience as it should be, fully conscious, deeply appreciated, neither grasped nor rejected, but simply allowed to be itself. The whetstone song against metal had ceased, but its memory lingered in air that seemed to hold echoes longer than physics should permit. Sound and silence worked together here, each giving meaning to the other, creating symphony from elements that might elsewhere be mere noise or emptiness. In such harmony, even solitude became form of communion. Stars reflected in perfect ice created double infinity that spoke of connections beyond immediate perception. Above and below, celestial patterns repeated themselves with variations that suggested underlying unity expressing itself through apparent diversity. The same forces that moved planets through their courses moved mysterious presence through dark waters, moved warrior's breath through cold air, in rhythms ancient as existence itself. This was the peace Faye had tried to help him understand. Not absence of strength, but strength at rest. Not withdrawal from life, but full participation in moments that offered restoration rather than challenge. Such moments were gifts that could not be grasped, only received with gratitude and appreciation for their temporary presence. The mysterious pulse from beneath the ice seemed to acknowledge the approaching transition from deepest night toward earliest morning, though dawn remained hours distant. Perhaps that patient presence sensed celestial rhythms through water and ice, maintaining awareness of cycles that governed existence even in depths where sunlight never penetrated. Such awareness spoke of wisdom adapted to environment rather than imposed upon it. A subtle shift in the wind brought new scents across the frozen expanse. The distant aroma of pine resin, the clean smell of snow beginning to form in high clouds, the faint trace of wood smoke from some far settlement where others maintained their own vigils against the night. These fragrant messages spoke of life continuing in countless forms across the landscape, each following its own rhythms while participating in larger patterns of existence. Kratos breathed deeply of the crystalline air, feeling each inhalation cleanse something within him that he had not realized needed cleansing. The cold burned away more than physical impurities. It seemed to clarify thoughts that had grown tangled with worry and responsibility, emotions that had accumulated like dust in unused corners of his awareness. In this profound silence, he could perceive the shape of his own existence with unusual clarity. The pulse beneath the ice had grown so familiar it seemed to emanate from within his own chest, as if his heart had synchronized completely with whatever vast presence maintained its patient vigil in the dark waters below. This unity felt natural rather than strange, connection rather than intrusion. Two solitary beings had found companionship across barriers of element and species, sharing the same moment of crystalline peace. He thought of the countless nights he had spent in vigilance over the years, standing watch against enemies real and imagined, maintaining alertness against threats that might emerge from darkness or design. How different this felt. This vigilance without urgency, this awareness without anxiety. Tonight, strength served contemplation rather than conflict. Power rested rather than strained against constraint. The whetstone lay warm in his palm despite the cold, its familiar weight offering comfort that transcended mere physical sensation. This simple tool had accompanied him through battles and quiet moments alike, had served purposes both practical and meditative across years of wandering and conflict. In its consistency, he found reflection of his own endurance, scarred but functional, worn but not broken, adapted to whatever circumstances required. Memory brought him images of other quiet nights, some spent in preparation for battle, others in recovery from it, many in the simple maintenance of existence that filled the spaces between more dramatic events. Yet few had offered this quality of profound peace, this sense of time suspended between purpose and rest. Such moments were gifts that could not be earned or demanded, only received with gratitude when they appeared. The stars reflected in the ice seemed to pulse with their own rhythm now, creating illusion of cosmic breathing that matched the mysterious presence below and his own steady inhalation and exhalation. Reality and perception blended in ways that mattered less than the comfort such apparent harmony provided. Everything was connected in this moment. Earth and sky, surface and depth, solitude and companionship. A memory surfaced of Faye speaking about the way water remembered everything it had touched, carried within itself traces of every shore it had caressed, every raindrop that had joined its flow. Like us, she had said, watching river current carry leaves downstream. We carry everyone we've known, every place we've been. Nothing is ever truly lost, just transformed. Her words had seemed fanciful then. Tonight, they resonated with profound truth. The inlet itself embodied such transformation, from chaos to calm, from the Leviathan's violent domain to this mirror of celestial beauty. What had once been battlefield now served as sanctuary, proof that even the most turbulent circumstances could give way to peace when proper conditions aligned. There was hope in such transformation, promise that his own existence might continue evolving in directions he could not yet imagine. The rhythmic pulse from below seemed to grow stronger as these thoughts took shape. That mysterious presence, perhaps responding to recognition of shared understanding. Both had found ways to exist peacefully within environments that had once known only violence. Both had discovered that patient endurance could transform the nature of experience itself. In such recognition, true companionship was born. The cold had become so natural he barely noticed it now, his body's adaptation complete and comfortable. What had initially required conscious acceptance now felt like harmony, proof that even harsh conditions could become allies when approached with proper intention. The lesson extended beyond physical comfort to encompass life's broader challenges. Resistance created suffering, while acceptance opened possibilities for unexpected peace. His breathing had deepened without conscious direction, each exhalation carrying away tension he had not realized he was holding, each inhalation drawing in clarity that penetrated deeper than ordinary awareness. The rhythm matched the pulse from below, matched the subtle shift of reflected stars, matched something fundamental about existence itself that was usually obscured by the noise of daily struggle. The whetstone resumed its gentle passage across the axe's already perfect edge, not because improvement was needed, but because the motion itself had become meditation. Connection to purposes that transcended immediate utility. Each stroke carried intention without urgency, care without anxiety, the satisfaction of work well done, combined with acceptance that such work was never truly finished. Around him, the frozen inlet maintained its crystalline perfection, beauty that existed for its own sake, without need for witness or appreciation. Yet consciousness enhanced rather than diminished such beauty. Awareness adding dimensions that pure aesthetics alone could not provide. Observer and observed enriched each other through the simple act of recognition. Time continued its honey-slow passage, each moment complete in itself, yet flowing naturally into the next. Past and future seemed equally distant and irrelevant compared to the eternal present that had claimed this place, this moment, this rare conjunction of circumstances that permitted such profound rest. Linear progression had transformed into cyclical rhythm that recognized no beginning or end. The mysterious presence below had become so integrated into his awareness that distinguishing between its pulse and his own heartbeat required conscious effort. Such unity spoke of connections that transcended physical separation, bonds that could form across any barrier when recognition was mutual and authentic. He was not alone while such communion persisted. Faye's voice seemed to whisper through the crystalline air. Peace is not the absence of strength, but strength at rest. When you learn to carry power without being carried away by it, when you can be strong without needing to prove it, then you discover what true mastery means. The words settled into his consciousness like snowflakes on still water, gently, naturally, becoming part of the landscape they touched. The truth of such wisdom revealed itself through present experience. Tonight, his strength served contemplation rather than conquest. Power rested rather than strained against constraint. This was mastery in its purest form. Not dominion over others, but harmony within himself. Not victory through conflict, but peace through acceptance of what each moment offered. The wind carried new messages across the frozen expanse. Distant sounds of night birds calling to their mates. the soft crack of ice settling under temperature changes, the whispered conversation between pine branches heavy with snow. Life continued its ancient patterns all around him, following rhythms established long before gods or mortals had names for such things. His own existence felt part of these larger patterns now, connected to cycles that included the mysterious presence below, the wheeling stars above, the steady pulse that seemed to emanate from the very heart of existence itself. Such connection required no understanding beyond recognition, no explanation beyond the peace it provided in moments like this. The whetstone song against metal had become so familiar it seemed like part of the natural soundscape, as organic as wind through branches or water flowing over stone. The distinction between artificial and natural dissolved when purpose aligned with peace, when conscious action harmonized with unconscious rhythm. Everything was connected when viewed with sufficient clarity. As the night deepened toward its most profound expression, Kratos allowed himself complete surrender to this rare gift of time, without urgency, strength without conflict, awareness without anxiety. The warrior's perpetual vigilance relaxed into something deeper and more sustainable. Not abandonment of responsibility, but recognition that some forms of rest actually enhanced rather than diminished capacity for future action. The pulse beneath the ice continued its steady rhythm, that patient presence maintaining faithful vigil in dark waters, where pressure and cold created environment as alien as any divine realm. Yet consciousness persisted there, had found ways to thrive in conditions that would destroy the unprepared. There was profound lesson in such adaptation, model worth contemplating for anyone whose existence had required constant flexibility. Memory brought him images of other transformations he had witnessed, landscapes changed by seasons, enemies become allies through shared struggle, his own evolution from rage-driven destroyer to someone capable of nurturing growth in others. Change was the only constant, but change need not mean loss. Sometimes it meant discovering possibilities that had always existed, but remained hidden until circumstances revealed them. The crystalline air seemed to hold echoes longer than physics should permit, creating sensation of conversation between present action and its reflection, between intention and consequence. In such dialogue between doing and being, between effort and acceptance, wisdom emerged that could not be grasped directly, but only received through patient attention to what each moment offered. The stars reflected in perfect ice created patterns that seemed to shift and flow despite the frozen surface's immobility. Perhaps this was perception adapting to profound stillness, finding movement in apparent stasis, discovering that even the most complete rest contains subtle forms of vitality. Nothing was ever truly static when observed with sufficient depth. His breath emerged in silver clouds that dissipated quickly in the dry air, each exhalation carrying away something unnecessary, each inhalation drawing in something essential. The exchange felt significant, not mere respiration, but communion with environment that gave as much as it received. In such reciprocity, individual existence found its proper place within larger patterns. The mysterious rhythm from below had become so integral to his experience that silence would now feel incomplete, like missing heartbeat or interrupted breathing. What had begun as curious phenomenon had evolved into companionship that required no meeting, no communication beyond mutual recognition of shared existence. Such connections were perhaps the deepest possible between conscious beings. As Kratos prepared eventually to depart this place of unexpected peace, he carried with him recognition of what solitude could offer when embraced rather than endured. The warrior's path need not be constant battle. It could include moments like this, when strength served rest rather than conflict, when vigilance became meditation rather than mere survival. The inlet had taught him something valuable about the balance between action and acceptance, between force and flow. The rhythmic pulse from below continued as he gathered his tools, that mysterious presence maintaining its patient vigil long after surface dwellers returned to their own territory. Some encounters required no meeting, no communication beyond mutual recognition of existence. Some wisdom came through appreciation rather than analysis, through acceptance rather than understanding. The frozen inlet remained perfect in its crystalline silence as he prepared to leave, stars above and below creating double infinity that would continue long after individual observers departed. Beauty persisted without audience, peace existed without witness, but both were enhanced by conscious appreciation when it was offered freely and without demand for reciprocation. In carrying this moment forward, he would carry also the recognition that peace was always available to those willing to receive it, that strength could serve rest as well as conflict, that even the warrior's path included opportunities for harmony when approached with appropriate intention. The pulse beneath the ice would continue, the stars would wheel in their courses, and somewhere in the balance between action and acceptance, wisdom would continue to reveal itself to those prepared to recognize its presence. The first hint of dawn remained hours distant when Kratos finally rose from his vigil beside the frozen inlet, the mysterious rhythm from below offering what seemed like a gentle farewell pulse before settling into its eternal cadence. He secured the perfectly sharpened axe at his side and shouldered his pack with movements that carried the inlet's crystalline stillness within them, not as memory, but as integrated part of who he was becoming. The peace discovered here would travel with him, a foundation upon which other moments of clarity might build. As he turned from the star-mirrored surface toward the forest paths that would eventually lead home, his breath emerged in silver clouds that caught the moonlight like visible prayers offered to the patient darkness. The night air carried promises of snow to come, of winter deepening into its most profound expression, of seasons turning as they always had regardless of mortal struggles or divine politics. There was comfort in such constancy, in the way natural cycles continued their ancient patterns. The path ahead would take him through territories both familiar and strange, landscapes where other forms of peace might be discovered by those prepared to recognize them. He thought of the high mountain passes where wind carved sculptures from snow and stone, where solitude took different forms, but offered similar gifts to those willing to receive them. Perhaps his journey was just beginning to reveal the varieties of stillness available to warriors who had learned the difference between strength that conquered and strength that simply was. The morning had begun with clear skies and crisp air that stung the lungs in the most invigorating way, promising a straightforward journey through the mountain passes that would save them 2 days of travel around the longer valley routes. Kratos had studied the ancient maps Mimir possessed, cross-referencing them with his own observations of the terrain from their cabin's vantage point, and determined that the direct path through what the locals called Skadi's Pass offered their most efficient route to the distant trading settlement they sought. Atreus had greeted the prospect with enthusiasm, his pack secured and bow ready before his father had finished explaining their intended route. The boy's eagerness for exploration had grown with each journey, his confidence in navigating unfamiliar terrain matching his increasing skill with both weapon and woodcraft. What had once required careful guidance now flowed from natural instinct, developed through countless hours spent learning to read the subtle signs that distinguished safe passage from potential hazard. The pass earned its name from more than mere association with the goddess, Mimir had explained as they departed their cabin in the pre-dawn darkness. Ancient hunters believed Skadi herself walked these particular mountains, blessing those who showed proper respect, while misleading travelers who approached with arrogance or greed. The stories may contain more truth than typically assumed. Kratos had acknowledged this information with characteristic pragmatism, neither dismissing the possibility of divine presence nor allowing superstition to influence practical planning. Throughout his existence, he had encountered sufficient evidence of godly intervention to maintain healthy caution, yet also recognized how mortal imagination often attributed supernatural causes to natural phenomena, perfectly explainable through careful observation. Their initial progress had validated the route's promise. The trail winding steadily upward through increasingly spectacular terrain without presenting significant obstacles. Ancient cairns marked the path at regular intervals, weathered stone monuments that spoke of centuries of use by travelers, seeking the same advantages of direct passage through otherwise forbidding landscape. The first hints of changing weather had appeared near midday, subtle shifts in wind direction and atmospheric pressure that Kratos recognized from long experience with mountain conditions. What began as occasional wisps of cloud clinging to distant peaks gradually thickened into more substantial formations, their movements suggesting developing system that might bring more than casual precipitation. Weather's turning, he observed to Atreus, who had been studying interesting rock formations they encountered rather than monitoring atmospheric conditions. We may need to seek shelter if conditions deteriorate significantly. The boy looked up from examining fossilized remains embedded in roadside stone, immediately scanning the sky with newly focused attention. His ability to shift from casual observation to tactical awareness had improved markedly during their travels, reflecting maturation that extended beyond mere physical growth into practical wisdom essential for survival in unpredictable environments. "How long do we have?" he asked, calculating distance to potential shelter against likely timeline for weather systems arrival. "An hour, perhaps two, before serious snowfall begins," Kratos estimated, studying cloud formations with experienced assessment. "The pass ahead narrows considerably. Poor visibility there could prove treacherous, but the same narrow walls might offer protection if we can reach appropriate shelter point." They quickened their pace without sacrificing caution, years of shared travel having established efficient rhythm for such situations. Atreus matched his father's increased speed naturally, his endurance having developed to levels that no longer required adjustment of overall group capability. Where once Kratos had needed to moderate his natural pace to accommodate his son's limitations, now they moved as unified team whose individual strengths complemented rather than constrained collective effectiveness. The trail began its descent into Skadi's Pass proper as the first snowflakes appeared, individual crystals drifting lazily through increasingly still air, their intricate structures visible briefly before melting against exposed skin or accumulating on clothing and equipment. The beauty of fresh snowfall never failed to inspire quiet appreciation, even in circumstances where practical concerns dominated immediate attention. "It's starting," Atreus noted unnecessarily, extending his palm to catch several flakes for closer examination before they dissolved. Despite growing familiarity with winter conditions, he retained childlike wonder at snow's delicate complexity, each crystal unique yet following consistent patterns that spoke to underlying mathematical principles governing natural formation processes. The pass itself revealed why ancient travelers had chosen this route despite obvious challenges. Towering walls of stone rose on both sides, carved by millennia of wind and water into dramatic formations that channeled the path through otherwise impassable terrain. Natural arches spanned overhead at irregular intervals, creating sheltered sections where accumulated snow remained lighter and wind disturbance lessened considerably. More significantly, previous travelers had enhanced these natural advantages through careful stonework. Walls built to deflect wind, alcoves carved to provide rest areas, even primitive drainage systems that prevented water accumulation during seasonal melts. The engineering might appear crude compared to more sophisticated construction, yet demonstrated thorough understanding of local conditions and practical solutions developed through generations of use. Someone spent considerable effort making this passage viable, Kratos observed, appreciating both the skill and dedication required for such improvements. Throughout his travels, he had learned to recognize signs of competent craftwork, respecting those who applied their abilities toward beneficial rather than destructive purposes. The snowfall intensified as they progressed deeper into the pass, individual flakes becoming dense curtains that reduced visibility significantly, while creating ethereal atmosphere that transformed familiar mountain environment into something approaching magical realm. Sound became muffled, their footsteps and conversations absorbed by the accumulating snow that deadened echoes normally bouncing between stone walls. There, Atreus pointed ahead, to where the path widened into small circular area, sheltered by overhanging rock formations. That looks like it was designed for exactly this situation. His assessment proved accurate. The widened area contained obvious signs of frequent use as temporary shelter, including stone-laned fire pits surrounded by flat rocks suitable for seating, with alcoves carved into surrounding walls providing storage for emergency supplies or protection from wind. Most remarkably, the entire area remained relatively clear of snow accumulation despite the increasing intensity of precipitation, suggesting sophisticated understanding of air currents and weather patterns by those who had enhanced this natural refuge. They established their temporary camp with practiced efficiency, Kratos gathering appropriate fuel while Atreus cleared the existing fire pit and prepared their modest supplies. The shelter's design became more apparent as they worked, every detail positioned to maximize comfort and safety while minimizing exposure to the elements that could make such refuge necessary. Whoever built this understood mountain travel, Batius commented as he arranged their gear in one of the carved alcoves, noting how its position provided easy access while protecting contents from moisture and wind. Everything's positioned perfectly for actual use rather than just appearance. The work of professionals, Kratos agreed, examining construction details that revealed significant expertise. Hunters, perhaps, or guides who used this route regularly enough to justify substantial investment in improvements. As their fire caught and began providing welcome warmth, the snowfall continued its gentle but persistent accumulation around their shelter. Within the protected area, conditions remained comfortable, despite increasingly harsh weather in the exposed sections of the pass. The contrast emphasized both the severity of mountain conditions and the value of proper preparation by those who understood such environments intimately. It was while arranging their supplies that Atri discovered the carved obelisk standing in one of the shelter's alcoves, partially concealed by shadows cast by the flickering fire. The stone monument rose perhaps twice his height, its surface covered with intricate symbols and pictographs, arranged in organized patterns that clearly represented deliberate communication rather than random decoration. "Father, look at this," he called, approaching the carved stone with reverent curiosity. "There's writing here, and images too. It looks like it's been here as long as the shelter itself." Kratos joined his examination of the obelisk, studying the weathered carvings with interest enhanced by their unusual sophistication. Unlike the simple waymarkers they had encountered on other journeys, this monument displayed artistic skill and cultural knowledge, suggesting creation by individuals with significant education and resources. rather than casual travelers marking their passage. "Can you read it?" he asked, knowing his son's linguistic abilities had expanded considerably during their travels, particularly regarding ancient dialects and symbolic systems they encountered throughout their journey. Adrius traced specific symbols with careful attention, his finger following carved lines as if tactile contact might reveal meanings that visual examination alone could not provide. "Some of it," he replied after several moments of concentrated study. "It's written in multiple languages, Old Norse, but also something that looks like giant script, and symbols I don't recognize at all. What does the readable portion say?" "It's about Skadi," the boy answered, his voice taking on the measured cadence he used when translating complex materials, "about her connection to this place specifically. It says she walked these mountains in the earliest days, teaching the art of survival to those who approached with proper respect." He paused, examining more symbols, and something about stillness. "The peace found in winter's embrace, when struggle ceases and awareness expands." The reference to stillness resonated with their current circumstances, surrounded by the gentle hush of falling snow, while sheltered from the elements in refuge created by thoughtful preparation outside their protected alcove. The storm continued its quiet work of transforming the landscape, each flake contributing to cumulative change that would leave the world appearing fundamentally different despite the gradual nature of individual contributions. "There's more," Atreus continued, his translation becoming more confident as familiar patterns emerged from the archaic text. Stories of travelers who found wisdom in forced pauses, who discovered that interruptions to planned journeys often led to insights more valuable than reaching intended destinations on schedule. "Philosophy carved in stone," Mimir commented from his position near the fire, where he had been observing their investigation with scholarly interest. "The ancient peoples often used such monuments to share deeper wisdom alongside practical information, combining navigation aids with spiritual guidance for those capable of appreciating both layers of meaning." The carved images surrounding the text supported these philosophical themes, depicting human figures in various poses of contemplation and observation, rather than action or conflict. Some showed individuals seated in meditation, others standing with arms raised towards sky or mountain peaks, all conveying sense of harmony with natural environment rather than domination over it. One particular scene caught Atreus's attention, a detailed carving showing what appeared to be a family group, 2 adults and a child, seated around a fire much like their own current arrangement. The figures were rendered with remarkable skill, their expressions conveying contentment and connection despite the simple setting. Above them, carved wolves watched from a respectful distance, their presence protective rather than threatening. "This scene," Atreus said, tracing the carved figures with gentle reverence. "It's almost like someone saw us coming and prepared this reminder that we're part of something larger, a continuing story of travelers finding shelter and wisdom in this place." The realization sent a gentle chill through both father and son, not of fear but of profound recognition. They were indeed part of an ancient pattern, following in footsteps of countless others who had sought passage through these mountains and discovered something greater than mere transit. The obelisk served not just as historical record, but as living testament to enduring human experiences that transcended individual circumstance. "The carving includes details that match our situation precisely," Kratos observed, studying the scene with growing wonder. "The arrangement of the fire pit, the positioning of the alcoves, even the way the wolves maintain their watching distance. all exactly as we have experienced. Mimir's voice carried unusual reverence as he spoke. Such monuments often possess prophetic elements alongside historical record. The ancients understood time differently than we do, seeing past, present, and future as interconnected rather than strictly sequential. What appears to be documentation of previous events might equally represent glimpses of continuing patterns yet to unfold. This perspective transformed their understanding of the obelisk from simple waymarker to complex temporal bridge, connecting their immediate experience with both historical precedent and ongoing cosmic patterns. They were simultaneously following ancient footsteps and creating new ones, participating in cyclical journey that honored tradition while allowing for individual variation and growth. "It's beautiful," Atreus observed, studying one particularly detailed scene showing hunters sharing kill with what appeared to be wolves rather than driving them away. "It shows a different relationship with the wilderness than most people maintain. Partnership instead of conquest." Kratos examined these images with growing appreciation for their creator's perspective, recognizing philosophy that aligned with lessons he had learned through painful experience. His earlier existence had been dominated by attempts to impose will through force, achieving temporary victories that ultimately led to greater conflict and loss. Only through developing cooperation with natural patterns rather than opposition to them had he found sustainable peace. As afternoon faded toward evening and snowfall continued its steady work outside their shelter, they settled around the fire for the longer wait weather conditions would require. The storm showed no signs of immediate resolution, suggesting they would need to remain in refuge overnight before attempting to continue their journey through the path. "We should rest while opportunity permits," Kratos decided practically, recognizing that forced delays often provided valuable recovery time despite initial inconvenience. "The storm will pass and we'll continue with the morning." "I don't mind waiting," Atreus replied, gazing out at the snow-veiled landscape beyond their shelter. "There's something peaceful about being here, like the place itself encourages slowing down and paying attention to things normally overlooked during regular travel." This observation captured something essential about their current situation that extended beyond mere weather delay. The enforced pause provided opportunity for reflection and awareness, often impossible during active travel, when attention necessarily focused on navigation, hazard assessment, and maintaining progress toward specific destination. The carved obelisk seemed to preside over these reflections, its ancient wisdom offering context for temporary inconvenience that transformed mere delay into potentially meaningful experience. Rather than frustration at interrupted plans, the monument suggested embracing such pauses as opportunities for insights available only when normal activity patterns were suspended. The carvings mentioned spirits that watch over travelers in these mountains, Atreus noted, returning his attention to the monument's more mysterious passages. Snow wolves blessed by Skadi herself, appearing to those who demonstrate proper respect for wilderness and its patterns. As if summoned by his words, subtle movement became visible through the falling snow at the edge of their vision, pale forms moving with fluid grace between the storm veils, barely distinguishable from wind-blown drifts, yet possessing unmistakable purposefulness in their motion. The shapes appeared and vanished like memories at the threshold of consciousness, present enough to register awareness, yet elusive enough to question their reality. "Do you see them?" Atreus whispered, not wanting to disturb whatever presence might be observing their camp. Kratos followed his son's gaze toward the shifting forms barely visible through snow curtains, his experienced senses detecting movement patterns consistent with large predators, yet carrying none of the tension typically associated with potential threats. "I see something," he confirmed quietly. Whether wolves or something else entirely remains unclear. The forms continued their distant circulation around the shelter area, maintaining consistent distance that suggested neither aggressive intent nor fearful avoidance. More like curious observation from entities comfortable in conditions that challenged most living creatures. Their movement possessed ethereal quality that made direct observation difficult, as if they existed partially in ordinary reality and partially in some parallel state accessible only under specific circumstances. "They're beautiful," Atrarius breathed, catching clear a glimpse of pale fur and intelligent eyes that reflected firelight despite the considerable distance between shelter and watching forms. "Not threatening at all, more like guardians making sure we're safe." "Skadi's wolves," Mimir identified with quiet certainty. "The stories describe exactly such apparitions. Spirits of the hunt that appear during storms to observe worthy travelers while remaining hidden from those who would disturb the mountain's peace. The spiritual nature of their observers became more apparent as shadows deepened around their camp, the wolf forms growing slightly more distinct, yet simultaneously more obviously supernatural in origin. They moved without disturbing accumulated snow, left no tracks despite appearing substantial enough to cast shadows, and occasionally seemed to phase in and out of visibility, as if existing at intersection of multiple realities. Rather than fear, their presence inspired profound sense of privilege. Recognition that they were witnessing phenomena experienced by few living individuals. Confirmation that the ancient stories preserved in stone carvings contained more literal truth than typically acknowledged. The wolves represented connection to powers beyond ordinary perception, reminders that wilderness contained depths of meaning accessible only to those who approached with appropriate reverence. "They're protecting this place," Atrus realized, understanding dawning as he observed the spirit's behavior patterns, making sure it remains safe for travelers who need shelter, preserving the peace necessary for rest and reflection. This interpretation aligned with everything they had discovered about the shelter and its construction, not merely practical refuge but sacred space, where natural and supernatural elements combined to provide sanctuary, transcending basic physical protection. The carved obelisk served as both information source and shrine, honoring powers that maintained this pocket of peace within otherwise challenging environment. As full darkness settled over the pass, and their fire provided the only human light visible in the snow-shrouded landscape, the sense of sacred presence intensified rather than diminished. The wolf spirits continued their silent vigil, occasionally approaching near enough for detailed observation before fading back into storm patterns that made their supernatural nature unmistakable. "I've never seen anything like this," Atrus confided to his father, voice filled with wonder rather than nervousness despite the extraordinary nature of their situation. "It feels blessed somehow, like we're being allowed to witness something most people never experience." Kratos nodded agreement. His own appreciation for the unusual circumstances deepened by recognition of how rarely such peaceful supernatural encounters occurred in his experience. Most divine manifestations he had witnessed involved conflict, manipulation, or demand for service. This gentle observation by protective spirits represented entirely different category of otherworldly contact. "The first time I saw snow," he said quietly, surprising both himself and his son with the unexpected personal revelation. "I believed it was divine punishment, the gods covering familiar landscape to confuse and weaken mortals who depended on predictable environment for survival." Atreus turned from watching the wolf spirits to focus complete attention on his father, recognizing the rarity of such spontaneous sharing of childhood memories. Throughout their relationship, Kratos had revealed little about his early experiences, making any glimpse into his past particularly precious. "I was young," Kratos continued, staring into flames that cast shifting patterns of light and shadow across the carved stone around them. "Perhaps no older than you are now. My training had been conducted entirely in Mediterranean climate. I had never experienced winter as understood in northern realms." The admission contained vulnerability, rarely displayed, acknowledgement of ignorance and fear from someone whose adult existence had been defined by competence and controlled power. For Atreus to witness his father's recollection of youthful uncertainty represented trust that had developed gradually through countless shared experiences of mutual dependence and support. "What changed your mind?" the boy asked gently, recognizing the importance of this moment while being careful not to press too forcefully for details that might cause his father to retreat into typical stoicism. "Experience," Kratos replied simply. "Learning that snow could provide insulation as well as exposure, concealment as well as visibility, beauty as well as hardship. Understanding that natural phenomena serve multiple purposes simultaneously, that initial impressions often reveal only surface characteristics of much deeper realities." He gestured toward their current surroundings. The shelter that protected them from harsh conditions while providing space for reflection and wonder. The storm that had forced pause in their journey while creating opportunity for extraordinary encounter with supernatural guardians. The cold that threatened discomfort while sharpening awareness and appreciation for warmth and companionship. "Like this place," Atreus observed, connecting his father's lesson to their immediate circumstances. "What seemed like obstacle, the storm forcing us to stop, became opportunity to discover something amazing we would have missed if we had continued traveling according to original plans." "Precisely," Kratos confirmed, pleased by his son's ability to extract broader principles from specific examples. Throughout their travels together, these moments of philosophical connection had proven as valuable as practical skills development, creating foundation of shared understanding that strengthened their relationship beyond mere survival partnership. The wolf spirits seemed to respond to this exchange, their movements becoming slightly more animated, as if acknowledging the wisdom being shared around the human fire. Several approached close enough for detailed observation. Magnificent creatures with intelligence clearly exceeding ordinary animal awareness, their forms shimmering between solid appearance and translucent manifestation that emphasized their supernatural origin. "They're listening," Atreus whispered in amazement, observing how the spirit's behavior corresponded to their conversation. "They understand what we're discussing." "Skadi's wolves possess divine intelligence," Mimir explained. "They serve not merely as hunters, but as guardians of wisdom, observing mortal struggles while ensuring worthy individuals receive guidance appropriate to their circumstances and needs." This revelation added deeper significance to their encounter, suggesting the spirit's presence represented more than coincidental timing, but actual response to their demonstration of philosophical openness and mutual respect. By sharing vulnerable memories and drawing meaningful conclusions from challenging circumstances, father and son had apparently earned recognition from entities that appeared only to those whose character merited such extraordinary privilege. The largest of the wolf spirits approached closest to their fire, stopping just beyond the circle of light cast by their flames, yet near enough for clear observation of features that combined natural lupine characteristics with obviously supernatural elements. Its eyes held depth of awareness, suggesting individual personality rather than mere instinctive behavior. while its form maintained perfect poise despite the storm conditions that would challenge ordinary creatures. Beautiful, Kratos acknowledged quietly, his appreciation genuine despite lifelong wariness of divine manifestations. Unlike most supernatural encounters he had experienced, this presence carried no sense of threat, manipulation, or demand. Only peaceful observation and subtle protection that enhanced rather than compromised their security. "It's like they're blessing our journey," Atreus observed, feeling profound sense of gratitude for this unexpected gift of wonder embedded within what had begun as simple weather delay. Approving of our relationship and our choices. The wolf spirit seemed to acknowledge these words with subtle nod before turning and disappearing back into storm patterns that immediately concealed its form completely. The other spirits followed in similar fashion, their departure as graceful and mysterious as their initial appearance, leaving only the memory of extraordinary encounter and renewed sense of being watched over by benevolent forces. "They return to their eternal patrol," Mimir commented as the last spirit vanished into swirling snow, continuing their protection of these sacred mountains, while allowing fortunate travelers to glimpse the deeper mysteries that most never suspect exist. The fire crackled peacefully in aftermath of spiritual visitation, its warmth and light seeming even more precious for having been shared with entities whose presence bridged ordinary and supernatural realms. Around them, the storm continued its gentle work of transformation, each snowflake contributing to cumulative change that would leave the landscape renewed by morning. "Thank you." Atreus spoke to the apparently empty air, addressing whatever presence might still be listening despite invisible observation. "For letting us see, for protecting this place, for watching over travelers who need shelter and wisdom." No visible response marked his gratitude, yet subtle change in atmospheric pressure suggested acknowledgement received and appreciated. The entire shelter seemed to breathe with contentment, as if their recognition of sacred elements had been precisely what the location required from worthy visitors. As they prepared for sleep beside their warm fire, both father and son carried deep sense of privilege for having witnessed phenomena that most would dismiss as imagination or wishful thinking. Yet their shared experience provided confirmation that extended beyond individual perception, collaborative validation that the encounter possessed reality transcending simple projection of desired meaning onto random events. "Will we see them again?" Atreus asked as he settled into his sleeping furs, still hoping for additional glimpse of the magnificent spirit wolves. "Perhaps," Kratos replied gently, understanding both the hope and uncertainty underlying his son's question. Such encounters rarely occur according to mortal scheduling or desire. We were fortunate to witness what we did. This practical wisdom carried no disappointment. Recognition that extraordinary experiences derive much of their value from rarity and unpredictability. Regular manifestation would diminish rather than enhance their significance, transforming wonder into routine expectation that missed essential elements of humility and gratitude that made initial encounters so meaningful. Outside their shelter, the snow continued falling steadily through the night, accumulating in drifts that would make morning landscape appear completely transformed despite gradual nature of individual changes. The process exemplified lessons embedded in their extraordinary evening. Understanding that profound transformation often occurred through accumulated small changes rather than dramatic single events. That patience and attention revealed depths of meaning invisible to hurried observation. The carved obelisk stood silent vigil beside their camp, its ancient wisdom presiding over their rest with protective presence that transcended mere stone construction. Around its base, Fresh snow gathered in patterns that seemed almost intentionally artistic, as if even natural forces recognized sacred significance of this monument to enduring truths about wilderness survival and spiritual development. When they woke, with dawn's early light filtering through clearing clouds, the storm had passed completely, leaving behind landscape of pristine beauty that justified every moment of delay their shelter had required. The pass stretched ahead with obvious clarity, its continuation marked by cairns now topped with snowcaps that resembled small ceremonial monuments, celebrating successful navigation of natural challenges. "The way is clear," Kratos observed, studying weather conditions that promised excellent travel despite fresh snow accumulation. "We can continue our journey with confidence." Yet neither father nor son felt urgency to depart immediately from location that had provided such profound experience. The carved obelisk deserved final examination in better light, while the shelter itself warranted appreciation for engineering that had made their extraordinary encounter possible, through reliable protection from harsh conditions. "I want to remember everything about this place," Atreus said, studying details he might have missed during previous evening's focus on spiritual manifestations. The way the alcoves are positioned, how the fire pit draws air properly, even how the obelisk catches morning light. "Wise practice," Kratos agreed, understanding that careful observation now might provide valuable knowledge for future circumstances requiring similar solutions. Throughout his existence, survival had often depended on remembering successful strategies encountered during earlier challenges. They took final meal in the shelter before packing their gear with characteristic efficiency, leaving their temporary refuge in pristine condition for future travelers who might require similar protection. The fire pit was cleared of ash, alcoves were cleaned of any debris, even footprints around the immediate area were smoothed to minimize evidence of recent occupation. "The spirits will appreciate our care," Mimir observed approvingly as they completed these courtesies. "Proper behavior in sacred spaces ensures continued protection for all who demonstrate similar respect." As they departed their night's refuge and resumed travel through Skades Pass, the carved obelisk seemed to watch their progress with benevolent attention, its ancient symbols catching morning sunlight in ways that emphasized continuing relevance despite centuries of patient endurance. Behind them, the shelter waited quietly for future travelers who might require both physical protection and spiritual renewal. The path ahead revealed additional wonders that their previous evening's arrival in storm conditions had concealed completely. Ice formations of extraordinary beauty adorned the canyon walls, crystalline sculptures that nature had crafted through patient cycles of freezing and melting, creating delicate structures that rivaled the finest artisan work. Some resembled frozen waterfalls suspended in eternal cascade, while others formed intricate lacework patterns that caught morning light and scattered it in prismatic displays across the snow-covered ground. "Look at these formations," Atreus marveled, pausing to examine ice columns that rose like cathedral pillars between massive stone formations. "They're like frozen music. Each one different, but all following the same natural rhythm." Kratos observed these manifestations with quiet appreciation, recognizing artistry that transcended human capability, yet followed principles of balance and proportion that skilled craftsmen spent lifetimes attempting to achieve. The ice structures possessed ephemeral quality that made their beauty more precious. Awareness that seasonal changes would transform or eliminate these formations entirely, replacing them with different configurations, equally magnificent yet completely unique. "Nature creates without ego," he observed thoughtfully, drawing comparison between divine creation and mortal artistry that often served personal glorification rather than pure aesthetic. No signature required, no recognition sought, only beauty offered freely to those present to witness it. This philosophical insight resonated with lessons learned during their shelter experience, reinforcing understanding that wilderness provided continuous education for those willing to observe carefully and think deeply about phenomena encountered during travel. Each formation they passed offered potential wisdom regarding patience, adaptation, and finding harmony within challenging circumstances. The remainder of their passage through the mountains proceeded without incident, yet carried profound sense of having been transformed by their encounter with forces beyond ordinary perception. Both father and son moved with increased awareness of subtle patterns in their environment, recognition that wilderness contained depths of meaning, accessible to those who approached with appropriate reverence and attention. When they finally emerged from the pass onto broader trail leading toward their original destination, they carried more than successful navigation of challenging terrain. They bore witness to enduring presence of sacred elements within natural world, confirmation that ancient wisdom preserved in stone monuments reflected continuing realities rather than obsolete superstitions. The transition from the protected intimacy of the past to open mountain vistas provided striking contrast that emphasized the unique character of their sheltered experience. Here, wind moved freely across exposed ridges, creating different acoustic environment, where sounds carried further but lacked the focused resonance that had made whispers seem significant within canyon walls. The broader perspective revealed their night's refuge as small sanctuary within vast wilderness, precisely because of its modest scale and hidden location. "It feels different out here," Atreus observed, adjusting to change in atmospheric pressure and acoustic qualities that marked their emergence from Skadi's domain into more typical mountain terrain. Not better or worse, just ordinary somehow. Atreus understood his son's observation, recognizing how extraordinary experiences often highlighted normal conditions by contrast, while simultaneously making typical circumstances seem somehow diminished. Yet this comparison served valuable function, sharpening appreciation for both exceptional moments and everyday realities that provided necessary foundation for sustainable existence. Sacred spaces derive meaning partly from rarity, he explained, helping his son process potential disappointment at leaving location of profound significance. If every place possessed identical spiritual intensity, none would offer particular sanctuary when refuge became necessary. This wisdom helped Atreus understand that their extraordinary night represented gift rather than entitlement. Blessing to be treasured precisely because it could not be demanded or replicated through mere intention. The memory would serve as anchor point during future challenges, reminder that wonder and wisdom remained available to those who maintained openness to unexpected encounters with mystery. As they continued their descent toward lower elevations, both father and son found themselves changed by their experience in ways that would reveal themselves gradually over time. Conversations flowed more easily between them, philosophical observations emerging naturally from practical circumstances as their comfort with sharing deeper thoughts had been enhanced by witnessing supernatural phenomena together. "Do you think Mother ever saw Skadi's wolves?" Atreus asked during a rest stop beside a small stream that bubbled cheerfully through ice-rimmed banks. The question arose spontaneously from his ongoing process of connecting their recent experience with broader family history and heritage. Kratos considered this possibility carefully, Drawing upon his growing understanding of Fade's extensive travels and deep connection to ancient wisdom traditions, she knew much about hidden aspects of the wilderness that most never discover, he replied thoughtfully. Her knowledge of protective enchantments and sacred sites suggests familiarity with phenomena beyond ordinary experience. The thought that Faye might have stood in the same shelter, observed the same carved obelisk, and perhaps witnessed similar spiritual manifestations, provided comforting sense of continuity that strengthened rather than diminished their own encounter's significance. Rather than feeling like they were merely following predetermined paths, they could appreciate participating in ongoing tradition while contributing their own unique perspective and experience. I think she would have appreciated the stillness we found there, Atras continued, his voice carrying wistful affection for Mother, whose presence remained strong despite physical absence, the way everything became quiet and peaceful, allowing space for thoughts and feelings that get overwhelmed during regular daily activities. This observation highlighted another dimension of their shelter experience, the gift of enforced pause that created opportunity for reflection and connection, rarely available during normal travel patterns. Without storm requiring extended stop, they might have passed through the entire region without discovering the hidden sanctuary or encountering its supernatural guardians. Sometimes obstacles serve purposes beyond mere inconvenience, Kratos acknowledged, applying lesson learned during their extraordinary night to broader life patterns. What appears to block progress might actually redirect attention toward opportunities for growth that scheduled activities would otherwise prevent. They resumed their journey with renewed appreciation for unpredictable elements in travel and life, understanding that flexibility and openness often yielded more valuable results than rigid adherence to original plans. The storm that had seemed like simple weather delay had provided profound spiritual encounter that neither would have sought deliberately, yet both now treasured as transformative experience. The landscape around them continued revealing subtle beauties that their enhanced awareness made more apparent. Patterns in rock formations that suggested deliberate artistry, arrangements of trees that created natural cathedrals, even distributions of snow that emphasized rather than concealed underlying terrain features. Everything seemed more vivid and meaningful, as if their encounter with sacred elements had refined their perception permanently. "We're seeing differently," Atreus observed, articulating recognition that their experience had altered more than just memories but actual capacity for observation and appreciation. Like someone adjusted our vision to notice things that were always there but invisible to casual glance. We were blessed, Atreus reflected as familiar landscapes spread before them, his gratitude encompassing both practical shelter and extraordinary spiritual encounter they had experienced during storm-imposed pause in their journey. Indeed, Kratos agreed quietly, his own appreciation deepened by recognition of how rarely such peaceful supernatural contact occurred without demand for payment or service in return. The wolf spirits had asked nothing beyond respectful behavior, offering protection and wonder freely to travelers whose character warranted such gifts. The memory of their encounter would remain vivid for both father and son, serving as reminder that mysteries persisted within a familiar world for those willing to recognize them. In years to come, they would find themselves returning mentally to that snow-filled shelter, drawing strength from recollection of spiritual presence that had watched over them with benevolent protection. "I want to come back someday," Atreus said, looking over his shoulder toward the past they had left behind. Not expecting to see the wolves again, but just to sit in that shelter and remember what it felt like to be part of something so much larger than ourselves. Kratos nodded understanding, recognizing that certain places embedded themselves permanently in memory, not merely as locations but as states of consciousness, internal landscapes that could be revisited through recollection, even when physical return proved impossible. The shelter had become part of their shared story, reference point for discussions about wonder, patience, and receptivity to gifts offered by forces beyond ordinary perception. "The place will remember us as well," he assured his son, drawing upon intuitive understanding developed through their extraordinary experience. Sacred locations maintain awareness of those who approach with proper respect, becoming enriched by each worthy encounter, just as visitors are transformed by connection with enduring mysteries. This reciprocal relationship between place and person suggested that their night in Skades Pass had contributed something valuable to the location's ongoing purpose, adding their story to accumulated wisdom preserved within carved stone and protected alcoves. Future travelers might benefit from spiritual residue of their respectful presence, finding comfort enhanced by knowledge that others had successfully navigated similar challenges. As afternoon shadows began lengthening across the mountain slopes, they established camp in sheltered grove that offered practical protection without approaching the sacred intensity of their previous night's refuge. Here they could rest comfortably while processing their extraordinary experience through quiet conversation and shared contemplation of its meaning. "Do you think we'll encounter other places like that?" Atreus asked as they prepared their evening meal, curiosity about future possibilities balanced by appreciation for what they had already received. Other locations where the boundary between ordinary and extraordinary becomes so thin. Kratos considered this question carefully, drawing upon extensive experience with both supernatural phenomena and practical wisdom about expectation versus reality. Seeking such encounters directly often prevents their occurrence, he observed. The wolves appeared because we were present to genuine need rather than pursuing spiritual experience for its own sake. This insight helped explain why their shelter experience had felt so natural and unthreatening despite its extraordinary nature. They had been focused on practical necessity rather than magical ambition, creating conditions that allowed supernatural elements to manifest without the resistance that active seeking might have generated. Behind them, Skades Pass resumed its patient waiting for future visitors who might require refuge from mountain storms, while discovering that apparent obstacles often concealed opportunities for insights more valuable than reaching intended destinations, according to original schedules. In stillness found during forced pause, wisdom became available that normal activity patterns rarely permitted, confirming ancient understanding that some truths could only be perceived when ordinary motion temporarily ceased. The carved obelisk would continue its silent teaching, sharing knowledge accumulated through centuries of observation, while serving as marker for a location where natural and supernatural elements combined to provide sanctuary, transcending basic physical protection. Future travelers might discover similar blessings if they approached with hearts prepared to recognize magic embedded within practical necessity. Finding transformation disguised as temporary inconvenience on journeys toward destinations that might prove less significant than discoveries made during unexpected pauses along the way. And so our journey through the realms draws to a close for tonight. May Hypnos, god of sleep, watch over you as you drift through dreams of legendary proportions. If these tales of gods and monsters helped guide you to restful sleep, consider supporting our journey by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. Your support gives me the strength to continue sharing these stories night after night. Remember, these videos play uninterrupted through the night, with no ads to disturb your slumber, just the soothing sounds of mythic realms to accompany your dreams. For those seeking passage to exclusive content, our Patreon offers early access to all videos and special playlists crafted to enhance your sleep. The link awaits in the description below. Until our next journey together, may your sleep be deep, your dreams be mighty, and your rest be undisturbed by the conflicts of gods and men. Sleep well, brave one.